Don't judge my puns. Welcome to a life in the McDonald household. Hello and welcome back. If you haven't noticed, we are not in the kitchen again this week, but I am Denie and this is my channel, so thank you for joining us. This week, as I was preparing and planning out what we were going to do our video over, I realized that many of you don't actually know the story behind Denie's Sweet Oasis and how my bakery came into fruition, and then eventually this YouTube channel. So I just wanted to take a moment and I wanted to go over the story behind Denie's Sweet Oasis and just kind of give you guys all of that information. So here is mine and my bakery's story. So kick back, get some popcorn, and enjoy. The format of this video will be more like a Q&A. My husband will be asking the questions to help keep me on track because I do tend to ramble when I tell stories. He is the storyteller, not me. So he'll be using some prompts for me to answer. So I don't actually have a baking background. I actually went to Ashland University and I got my Bachelor's of Arts in Psychology because I am BA. And so while I was in college and after, I had several odd jobs. I was a recycler on campus in college, and after college I worked at the post office briefly as a rural delivery person. I also worked at Buffalo Wild Wings, and then I finally decided that I should probably start using my degree because after thinking it over, I decided I didn't want to spend the money to go back for my master's like I had originally planned. So I got a job at Children's Services, and yeah, that was a pretty dark point in my life. Going in, I thought that I would be perfectly fine with the job, that it wouldn't impact me, and honestly, I loved the job and I loved the people that I was working with. My clients meant a lot to me, and that was actually the saddest part when I did end up leaving, was leaving my clients behind. But the job itself is very demanding, required lots of paperwork and lots of state mandates, and it just was difficult with somebody who had the heart of and the intentions of an advocate and a social worker to work in a position where I felt that I had to act as an enforcer. And I just felt that I wasn't doing what I wanted to be doing and felt that I should be doing for the families that were on my caseload. And so it took me to a very dark place on a personal level. To put it as simply as possible and to kind of give you a visual, like I was working on work right up to our wedding, and I actually was working on work because we had issued tablets that we were able to take home, and I had things that were state mandated that had to be turned in by a certain date, so I was actually completing some notes and everything when we arrived at our hotel room. Like at the airport I was in the hotel room, and that was the first thing I did was I whipped out my tablet and I typed up those notes and I finally finished it.
So you keep repeating a dark place.
Mm-hmm.
Can you describe that to me? What do you mean by that?
So work had kind of taken over everything. I was working long hours, but I was also difficult to get up to go to work in the morning. So I was oversleeping, and then I was working, it was I think 8 to 4:30 were my hours, but I was arriving and then I was staying until like 7:30, sometimes 9 o'clock on Friday nights. So it had really taken over my life. And I remember coming home on several occasions and I would just sit down with ice cream. And not just, like, it started out as a little like personal Ben and Jerry's ice cream pints, and it eventually grew to like half gallons, and I would just sit down and I would get a spoon and I would eat out of it. Now with the larger ones, I didn't eat the whole thing. But I did. I would just sit there and I would eat. And I remember just not being able to get up off of the floor, like, because we didn't have furniture at the time. We were living in our apartment we had just moved into. So I would sit on the floor on a pile of blankets and pillows and turn on Netflix on the TV that was also on the floor. And I would just sit there and eat my tub of ice cream. And didn't want to get up in the mornings. And I just had nothing. I had nothing for myself, and we were newly married, and I felt that I had nothing to offer in our marriage, and it's a very desperate place and a helpless place to be, especially as a newlywed.
Just recently, I think I remember you looking through Facebook and you saw a photo, and you were saying that it was upsetting to you. Why was it upsetting? What did you see?
So it was actually on my phone. I never posted it. But I did save the photo. It was a photo that I took right near the end before I left Children's Services. And I had taken the day off early last minute because I got a phone call from my dad. And he said, hey, your brother and the boys, which were my nephews, my brother's sons. Hey, your brother and the grandkids and your mom and I are all going up to Cedar Point. And is there any chance that you could get off of work and meet us up there? And I said, well, let me talk to my supervisor. And I ended up being able to get off. And I drove straight from work. And I met them at Cedar Point. And I took a photo of, well, actually, I remember that day just being a relief. Like the feeling of just breathing and laughing at my nephews and getting to spend time with them, and the perspective that a child has of the world, and being able to see that innocence. And my youngest nephew and I took a photo on the merry-go-round, and I looked at that picture and my body is just drained. Like my face is drained. My skin looks like it's unhealthy, to like almost scaly, or I don't leathery. I don't really know how to describe it, but it looked discolored. My hair looked like it was just, there's nothing in it nutrient wise. Like everything in my body was just being drained. And the look of me that I recognize as myself in my eyes, it wasn't there. And it still hurts to just look at the photo because it just takes me back to everything that I was experiencing at that point.
So with that being said, I remember distinctly when it came down to you trying to quit CPS, there was some hesitation from that. Why was that?
I mean, I was miserable there. And I distinctly remember I would leave the house in the morning and I would be driving and I would just think, I just want to turn around. I would rather check myself into a mental hospital. And I remember that, but it was such a battle because I have such a deep fear of failure and being perceived as a failure, that I was so afraid that if I quit, then I would just be saying that what everybody said was right, that Children's Services is too tough. And I felt that I would be opening myself up for people to say, oh yeah, did you hear about Denie? She's a failure, and I know that it's unreasonable, but it was a very real thing that I experienced. And I mean, every time that I thought about leaving, all I could think of, well, everybody's just going to think you're a failure. And honestly, it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks, because nobody else was experiencing what I was experiencing, but it was still there.
And with you being a newlywed, because we just got married,
Mm-hmm.
was there any fear from that too?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I constantly, aside from what everybody else might think, I was very concerned about what you would think, because I didn't think that it was fair to place that kind of pressure on you when we were trying to figure out marriage and all of the things that come with being a newlywed, and then dumping all of this financial responsibility on you. I just I didn't want to put our marriage at risk over it. I didn't want to create a failure of our marriage by me backing out of a commitment that I had made and admitting defeat.
So when we finally came to the conclusion of you leaving CPS, what happened before then? You had to have an idea about the bakery before this, right?
Honestly, when I was in high school, at one point I had decided that I wanted to go to culinary arts school and open a bakery. It was very brief. It lasted for maybe a month. And that was that. And when I was laying in bed one day, because honestly, I would just spend my days in bed at some points. And this was one of those points, because you were at work, you worked second shift. So I would come home and you would have left for work an hour before I got home. And then you didn't get home until 11. And then I stayed up till midnight so that we could see each other. And then I would go to bed, get up and go to work. So I would come home and I would just get in bed if I wasn't eating ice cream. And this was one of those days. And I just remember laying there just feeling numb and knowing that I could not continue my life like that, because it's not who I am. And anybody that has known me at any point in my life, aside from those 8 months that I was at Children's Services, will tell you that's not who I am. I'm very bubbly. I am very joyful. I love to joke around. I love to do things. I love to go out and be in nature. I love to just do stuff. And I didn't have any desire to do that. And I was just so numb. And I knew that I couldn't continue. And I drew the line in the sand. And I was like, I have to change something, because this is so stagnant and it's unhealthy, and something has to give. But I don't know what. And all of a sudden it like hit me, but not like a brick, because it was an instant relief. And it was like a weight just jumped off of me, because it was like, well, why don't you open a bakery? You can bake. So after I discovered that I could bake, there was plenty more to our story, but we are actually going to put a pin in it for this week, and we are going to finish the story next week. We don't want to do the story injustice, our origin story, because we really think that it's important, and it's a strong foundation as to the cores and the values of the business today and the bakery today. So we don't want to do that injustice, and we want to tell the full story, but we also don't want to make a super, super long video of me just going on and on about it. So we are just going to break it up into 2 videos for you. So if you want to catch the rest of the story, be sure to subscribe. And while you're at it, go ahead and like us on Facebook and Instagram. But if you do subscribe, you are going to want to hit that bell. That way you do get notified when we post, so you won't miss anything. So see you next Tuesday.